Margaret.
Hello.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much. This is beautiful. What style is this done in?
This is Gothic, but in America, everybody knows it as diploma letters.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of Talk Vietnam. Now, our guest today is Margaret Shedperd, and as you can see, she has the quite skillful hands at the art of calligraphy, the art of writing. And this calligrapher's 45-year career has ranged from everything from writing on the diplomas of many of the U.S.'s prestigious colleges to restoring the inscriptions on many of the ceilings. So, in the following, we'll get a chance to talk more to her, but let's learn more about this calligrapher in the following.
As a resident of Boston, Massachusetts, and one of America's premier calligraphers, Margaret Shedperd's expertise has been praised for rekindling the love of calligraphy and written communication in the United States and many countries throughout the world. Margaret's calligraphy is featured in the Cooper Hewitt Museum or Smithsonian Collection in New York City, as well as the Rare Books and Manuscripts Department of the Boston Public Library. As an educator, Margaret's research into word calligraphy encompasses a huge swathe of knowledge. She has given lectures, workshops, and completed artist-in-residence programs at Boston University, Harvard Librarians Association, Stanford University, and many other venues in the United States and abroad, including Vietnam.
So, Margaret, thank you very much for that first beautiful demonstration. We have to thank you as well because actually the word Talk Vietnam here was written by Margaret as well. So please give her a round of applause for that. Can you tell us about this particular style?
That's a very simple style called Italic.
Yes.
It's about 500 years old, and it really hasn't changed in 500 years. It was so useful and simple and beautiful when it was invented.
Yes. So tell us, as we've seen in the clip, I mean, you have had extensive experience in the field of calligraphy and world calligraphy as well. Yeah. So what has actually brought you to Vietnam this time?
I got asked to give some workshops in traditional, basic Western calligraphy, that is Roman letters, Italic letters, Gothic letters, at art schools for their faculty and their advanced students.
Exactly. Can you share with us more about the type of letterings that you are teaching? You said Gothic, Italic. How are these, the learning of these different calligraphy important for the students here in Vietnam?
You know, it's as though if you were to be a photographer, you need to be able to draw. And for anything you do in graphic arts nowadays, especially something that uses text, you have to understand the Roman alphabet. That's what we read on screen, online, in newspapers. Almost everything we read is Roman. And yet people are not trained in where it came from. So I figured there was a lot of interest here, and it has turned out that there is.
Yes. Let's talk about Roman, for example. For the audiences out there who may not know kind of the origins, can you brief us through what makes Roman letterings interesting and different so that we can learn more about it?
You know, it's the same thing that makes Roman institutions interesting. They explored democracy, they had philosophy that we still study, they had architecture that is still admired around the world, and that was all 2,000 years ago. Their letters were almost as perfect as they could get 2,000 years ago. And those are the letters we use today.
Yes. In the context of Vietnam, why do you think students here should learn these type of typefaces?
Well, they're special. I mean, Vietnam is the only country in Asia that uses Roman letters to write their language. It seems so basic, but everybody else has their own special script. Vietnam uses Roman letters, and yet this is almost the first time they've had a course where they could learn where those Roman letters came from.
And how to write them as well properly.
Yeah, how to write them right and how to use them in design.
Yes. What do you think of, let's talk about you first started teaching the Roman letterings at the University of Fine Arts of Vietnam.
That's correct.
How were the students there? How did they respond to the course?
Oh, they were wonderful. I mean, they though a lot of them came from a fine arts background, they really understood what was going on in terms of learning about proportion and construction and learning about the aesthetics of a curve, why that's important. You know, if you're an art student, it means your eyes have been trained.
Yes, exactly. So they have a certain eye and they probably pick up the information that you're teaching very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, to better understand the vibe in one of Margaret's classes, we'll now take a look at her class teaching the style of Roman at the Vietnam University of Fine Arts. Let's have a look in the following.
On a 3-week stay in Vietnam this time, Margaret is showing students the basics of the Roman or Latin letterings of additional yet understudied alphabet in Vietnam.
Most of the typography we read comes from Roman. Even a design student may not know that. They think it's just designed by somebody and invented fresh. But it comes from 2,000 years of history. And a lot of the design decisions were made back then, and they got them right. So it's really worth studying.
Each letter in the alphabet is studied in fine detail for maximum accuracy. The students in class are mostly from the school's graphic design department and find the course fundamental to their studies.
Điều mình cảm thấy thú vị nhất trong tuần này đó là được học về một bộ chữ mới, bộ chữ mà căn bản nhất, từ đó phát triển ra các bộ chữ khác. Thì mình được bà Margaret và lớp học được bà Margaret dạy về các cái kỹ thuật viết và những cái điểm mấu chốt nhất để tạo nên một cái khuôn chữ đẹp. Nó góp phần tạo nên kỹ năng cơ bản về cái cách sắp xếp nghệ thuật chữ trong cái thiết kế tương lai mà bọn mình hướng đến.
Students are also learning how to best work Western calligraphy into the Vietnamese language.
Bài tập của bà mà giao cho cả lớp của mình ngày hôm nay ấy, đó là áp dụng các cái phông dấu vào trong cái phông chữ Roman và mỗi người lựa chọn cho mình một cái câu để viết để áp dụng cái Roman này vào tiếng Việt. Một cái cách đơn giản nhất để tạo cho một cái phông chữ đơn giản mà vẫn rất là đẹp. Mà trong thiết kế thì vô cùng là cần thiết.
Such courses challenge the limits of the students' hands and inspire them to be more creative in their future artistic endeavors.
Now, we know that I mentioned in the beginning, and I know this, that you have had about 15 years of experience in kind of writing by hand the names of the diplomas on U.S. schools, particularly the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, very well known. And tell us about this process of, writing each of the names on, let's say each class is about a few hundred.
Oh, no, each class is something like 2,000.
2,000.
And they graduate 3 times a year, so that I sort of had a constant freelance job for many, many years. Yes. I loved it. And those were not ordinary names. Students come to MIT from all over the world, and they have names that I had never encountered before. Those long Greek names or Thai names.
Maybe some Vietnamese names that you recognize?
Vietnamese names are easy. They only have a few letters in each name. But also at MIT, they study really complicated fields.
Yes.
And so for the PhD diplomas, I had to write the thesis titles, which would sometimes be 3 lines of total technical jargon.
Yes.
And it's hard to write something you don't really understand. So I learned to hyper-focus while I was working.
Yes, very, very focused. And how many names would you be able to write in a day?
Oh, I hate to tell you, 1 per minute.
1 per minute?
Yeah.
So fast.
Yeah, you get into a sort of flow state, and it's very peaceful, and you just keep going without interruptions. Interruptions are the killer.
You're a speedy writer and a beautiful writer as well.
A noted writer, Margaret is author to 17 books on calligraphy and the etiquette of written communication. Her best-selling 2001 book, Learn Calligraphy, provides detailed instructions on the science and art down to the very strokes of the most prevalent alphabets that we see around us every day. Learn Word Calligraphy, on the other hand, showcases Margaret's extensive and in-depth research of the letterings of civilizations across the globe. The author's journey through the world library of alphabets analyzes the anatomy of a language scripting and its cultural, social, and historical nuances. What's perhaps most impressive about Margaret's books is that she handwrites each page, every single word and number. When asked why, she admits that when it comes to a calligraphy book, no other method would have made sense.
So let's go back now to the beginning of your 45-year career. You've had an extensive career in the art of writing and the art of calligraphy. How did you first get into this art?
Oh, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was a terrible handwriter. When I was 9, I was the worst kid in the class. I got the worst grade in writing. And so after that, I was just looking for something better. And I found a teacher in college who spent the whole first semester on the Roman alphabet, just letter by letter, sort of opening my eyes to how beautiful it was. And after that, I knew I wanted to spend my life on it.
Exactly. What can calligraphy offer to us as an art?
You know, any art just offers you the chance to have something be better than the minimum. But I think what calligraphy offers you is this power to connect with people. When I take just an ordinary quotation and spend some time designing it so that it's arranged in a really striking way and lettered beautifully, suddenly somebody will look at that and they'll see what I saw, which is, this is a wonderful thought. I mean, that's what I really want to do. I want to put a frame around words and say, look at these and think about them.
Yes. Do you think it's possible to learn about history or culture through looking at calligraphy?
Oh, for sure. There's just so much that is revealed when you look at how people write.
Yeah.
For instance, in Korea, they used to have a character-based way of writing, the same way Vietnam used to. They had
like
character,
Nom.
Yeah, the Nom characters. About 500 years ago, their king decided that he didn't think that was a very good system because none of the poor or ordinary people could learn it very easily. So he introduced a phonetic alphabet. It's not Roman, it's a different system, but it's very simple. Well, the establishment just dumped on that. They hated the idea that just anybody could learn to write, that you didn't have to spend 15 years memorizing all these characters.
Exactly.
And they referred to this alphabet as, oh, it's just a girl's alphabet.
A girl's alphabet.
That was the worst thing they could say about it. So simple, a girl could learn it. And yet, that's the alphabet that Koreans use today, and it's a wonderful system.
It's wonderful to learn about the history behind it, knowing that, you know, it had faced that challenge of not becoming the final language. Any other type of calligraphy that sticks to mind and that helped you to understand more about the culture of one's country?
I mean, Vietnam's calligraphy is a perfect example. The establishment fought the introduction of Roman letters too. They used characters, the old Nom characters, up until 1911 for the civil service exams. And it was only in the 1920s when real political push for literacy was happening. And this was one of Ho Chi Minh's favorite political movements, was that he felt it was absolutely essential to have an easy alphabet to read so that everybody could read and write.
did your interest in Vietnamese calligraphy begin? I mean, it seems you have had extensive experience going to different countries, say Thailand, Korea, also other parts in the Middle East as well. What brought you, what brought your interest to Vietnam and Vietnamese calligraphy?
Oh, it began long ago.
Really?
I was very lucky. My parents took a job in Saigon right before the war.
Yes.
A long time ago, and I came with them. I was 18.
When was this?
1964.
In the middle of the war?
Actually, the war was just increasing, and I just loved the country. I loved the friends I had, and suddenly I had to leave. So for nearly 50 years, I've been dying to come back.
How is it living here during, the war?
We weren't really aware of the war, except that we were not allowed to go out of Saigon. My dad could go out because he was an expert in rice, and so he would visit farms and look at paddy in the field. But my mom and I had to stay in Saigon, so I got a job teaching English, which was fun. My students were 16 years old, and I was 18 years old, and it was really an interesting thing to do. Tufap was not so common back then, but what I did do was take Chinese painting technique lessons, and so that gave me a sort of basic foundation in using the brush.
And you first came back to Vietnam in which year?
4 years ago, through a group called Indochina Arts Partnership that specializes in getting artists together with their counterparts in America and Vietnam.
And that is the exact same group that have brought you here again this year. Let's go back to 2011, right? That's the first time you came back to Vietnam after nearly 50 years?
Nearly 50 years. Can you believe it?
Nearly 50 years. How did you feel? What was your feeling coming back to Vietnam?
I think like anybody who goes back to some place, you have a picture in your mind, and then that's not what's really there anymore.
Exactly.
I went to the house I lived in, and it's now an institute for some policy studies, and it's totally different. All of my friends had moved away. It was a little disappointing personally, but intellectually it was absolutely fascinating.
How so?
Well, because Vietnam has changed so much in that period and has had these ups and downs and just wildly different periods.
What was your first encounter with Vietnamese calligraphy in Vietnam?
I started just looking at signs. There's so many beautiful signs using Tufap. I mean, your sign is one example. Those are Tufap letters. And I think Vietnamese use them without even really focusing on why they do it, except that it's a favorite style.
Exactly, it's part of them. Thank you very much, Margaret, for that wonderful demonstration. It's really wonderful how the words and the letters can be both the figures and as well as the letters and like the horse or the cat and mouse. Very cool. But that goes into more of the kind of aesthetics of the writing that involves drawing. But what about handwriting? Because I know you also focus a lot on handwriting, particularly through your book called The Art of the Handwritten Note.
Yeah.
So what is the significance of learning handwriting in today's society?
Oh boy, that is a real tough question, and you will get a million different answers. In America, some of the school systems are giving up on handwriting instruction.
Really?
They just want to use the time for things that the kids need more, like computer lessons and other skills that they need more. And when you think about it, you don't write much during the day.
It's a very technologically based society now.
I mean, mostly people type and they use their thumbs to send text messages. And that's true all over the world.
So what is the importance of handwriting?
Well, I just hated to see people continually say, oh, that's a dying art. Maybe it's not used so much. But when it is used, it's just as powerful as it ever was. And when you get a letter in the mail, believe me, you really pay attention.
Exactly. And it also has so much meaning behind it as well, doesn't it? I mean, when someone sends you a letter, there's the thought that they spent the time to do that, and the love and the care.
It's the time. But it's also this kind of gut reaction you have. Like, if I'm sorting through my files, I find a letter from my mother, who died many years ago. I look at that letter, and it's like she's there.
Yes.
And somebody's handwriting is it's like their face. It's such a strong part of their identity.
Yes, I'm going to follow up you on that point. It's like their face. Their handwriting is like their face.
Yeah.
So do you think it's possible to look at one's handwriting and tell about that person's character?
Well, can you tell about a person's character from their face? Yes and no. There are people who believe that you really can see into their soul if you look at their handwriting. I don't feel quite like that. Partly because I've seen how people can change their handwriting with the proper instruction.
Exactly.
But people who believe that really believe it. And I have to say that in some countries, France is the one that comes to mind, you can't be hired for a job without submitting a handwriting sample.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that great?
They really believe
They
that
really believe in it.
They can tell the character
Yeah.
of who you are
Yep.
and judge you. But as you said, we can change our handwriting. And actually,
Yes.
you are an example of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because you said during her trip here in Vietnam, this time in Hue, Margaret Shedperd went on a visit about 14 kilometers outside of Hue to a certain pagoda where she met with this monk who was the teacher of Vĩnh Thọ. He is one of the most renowned calligraphers of Vietnam. His name is monk Minh Đức Triều Tâm Ảnh. And in the following, we'll take a look at their meeting.
As part of her calligraphy training course, Margaret finds herself in Hue, the former capital city of Vietnam, and in its architectural features, the hub of the Han Nom scripting culture of the country. 40 minutes outside the city at Huyền Không Sơn Thượng Pagoda, Margaret meets with the head monk, one of Hue's premier practitioners of calligraphy, monk Minh Đức Triều Tâm Ảnh. His calligraphic works were some of the earliest to be exhibited in Vietnam in the early 1980s. The realms of Occidental and Oriental letterings crossed during this meeting as the two calligraphers exchanged demonstrations. Monk Minh Đức shares his thought on the fundamental differences between the two.
Qua cái sự giao lưu này, nét bút của bà Margaret, thì tôi thấy rằng là dù sao người Tây phương mà thể hiện cái nét chữ Latin á, thì vẫn rơi vào kỹ thuật, rơi vào phương pháp. Mà nét chữ của Đông phương nói chung á, tránh phương pháp, tránh kỹ thuật mà thể hiện cái hồn, cái thân ở trong đó.
For Margaret, the space that surrounds the pagoda and the meeting with Vietnam's calligraphy legend has been a memorable experience.
It's very inspiring. He symbolizes what calligraphy can be in any country, where the best minds have studied and thought about it. He respects the culture. He knows that calligraphy is a way of making culture as good as it can be.
Margaret's encounter with monk Minh Đức has not only created a chance for different cultures of writing to meet, but has also given her insight into the exciting development and potential of the art of calligraphy in Vietnam.
What did you think about, being able to meet with Minh Đức Chiêu Tâm Ảnh, the monk who is very well known? I mean, he's been renowned in the field of calligraphy since the 1980s.
Yeah. It was a real privilege because not only is he a great man, but his calligraphy is in the landscape. And I got to see Vietnamese calligraphy at its very best. It was really just a step above anything I'd seen before.
Did you notice anything particular that was different in his technique of calligraphy?
I asked him about his technique, and he sort of laughed and said, well, it's very important to be in the present moment. I asked for technique, and he gave me philosophy,
yes,
which to me was extremely interesting. In my own calligraphy, I'm kind of like an engineer. You know, here's the tools, here's the forms, here's how you do it, and you do it the same way each time. He said he had an attitude that comes out of Zen Buddhism and that kind of flows from him, so that the technique is not the big thing.
Yes.
It is the state of mind.
It's almost like meditation.
Yeah,
in a sense.
It's very much like meditation.
Yes.
And so to watch him do calligraphy was just like watching someone think or watching someone meditate, only you could see inside their head.
What else have you learned about Vietnam through learning and looking at its calligraphy?
Well, I'd always been interested in brush calligraphy. So right away, when I noticed that the Roman alphabet was being rendered in brush calligraphy, I knew that Vietnam was sort of at the cutting edge of what's going on in the world. I've learned a lot about Vietnamese attitudes. I mean, the fact that they were very practical about adopting the alphabet and putting it right to use, and yet they gave it their own touch with the brush calligraphy that a lot of calligraphers do. They didn't sort of drag their feet on getting modern, and yet they made it their own.
Through the calligraphy, have you seen certain mixture between kind of the old influences of having the character and the new modern Roman alphabet?
Well, it's funny. All the calligraphers who come out right around during Tet and sit on the sidewalk and write New Year's greetings for people, a lot of them almost equally use the old characters and then use tu phap, which is the Vietnamese version of Roman done with a brush. And it's almost like people don't notice the difference because the brush makes it a very Vietnamese form. I learned that it is sort of at the core of the cultural identity, that it is not just something they do as a hobby or for amusement or entertainment or only at Tet. It's really something that holds a lot of their culture.
Exactly.
And for me, I can see that just by trying it and watching how they work.
Handwriting made into an art form. In today's modern digital age, hand lettering has been deemed a dying art. But for some, the agility of the pen in the right fingers is what's keeping calligraphy alive and well. Today, Margaret is teaching an advanced calligraphy class at Multimedia Training Center at PT Arena in Hanoi. For many in the class, calligraphy has become more than just a hobby.
Với cái kỹ năng viết chữ thì đòi hỏi cái tính kiên nhẫn rất là cao và sự kiên trì. Mà đôi khi bây giờ thì nhiều người không kiên trì được. Mình cảm thấy là nó cũng khá là quan trọng đấy, đặc biệt là với người trẻ. Nó không chỉ là viết chữ đơn thuần đâu, nhưng đạt sự hoàn hảo thì rất là lâu và chắc chắn là phải luyện tập rất nhiều.
Margaret's teaching assistant, 27-year-old Ding Pham, is also a graphic artist. He has studied under Margaret's instruction on both of her teaching visits to Vietnam. For him, calligraphy has become a powerful tool as he has incorporated much of what he has learned into his line of work.
Việc bà Margaret sang đây và dạy cho chúng tôi thì nó giống như là đưa cho chúng tôi trở lại về nguồn gốc, cội nguồn của calligraphy. Chúng tôi hiểu nó hơn, nắm bắt được nó hơn và cảm thấy yêu nó hơn. Nó có rất nhiều sân chơi. Tôi có thể thể hiện nó ở trên các cái ấn phẩm in ấn.
Back at APT Arena, students are learning techniques to create writing tools from the simplest of objects, helping calligraphy to be accessible to all.
Hiện tại sinh viên Việt Nam rất là thiếu những cái kiến thức, đặc biệt là những cái kiến thức về những cái môn nghệ thuật như thế này. Và những cái dịp như thế này là những cái dịp mà để sinh viên của FPT Arena cũng như là tất cả các bạn sinh viên học trong ngành nghệ thuật cọ sát hơn với cả những cái thứ mà trên thế giới người ta làm như nào, những cái ngành mà thật sự là không có dạy ở trong Việt Nam. Đây là một cái dịp mà để mọi người cọ sát và học thêm rất là nhiều cái về kỹ thuật cũng như là về cái khả năng sáng tạo của mình.
The ease and convenience of the keyboard have made us oblivious to the beauty of handwriting. But with such courses, calligraphy stretches the creative limits of the human hand and presents possibilities for the digital and handwritten realms to meet.
Now, in the past clip, we've just seen the report that you were also teaching at FPT Arena, which is a private institution here in Hanoi that teaches a lot of students in design and digital design. This is where, a class that has been able to bridge the two realms of written language and of digital design. And we also saw your meeting with Ding, who is a digital designer. So how do you think of this kind of intertwining of different realms?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's actually helping calligraphy because the devices now are not just keyboard access devices. You don't have to pound with your fingers to get letters into, say, an iPad. You can actually write with a stylus that will make something that looks very much like a calligraphy letter that you would write with ink on paper.
Yes, as we saw with Ding and his drawing on the... And how about the students? How about teaching graphic design students? Any different from teaching fine art students?
They're much more willing to use digital media. And I tend to learn a lot more coming back from them in terms of just how things are done using type, how things are done using digital media. I think they're much more plugged in that way. But I do have to say that I think even Din said that he likes ink on paper.
Yes.
Even though he's got these great input devices and all kinds of programs that will manipulate the calligraphy, I think ink on paper has a special sort of appeal.
Yes. What would you say to people out there who are sitting in their offices every day, sitting in front of the computer, typing away, and who haven't really touched paper and pen in a really long time? What would you say to them to get them rethinking?
Oh, man. I mean, I'm married to an engineer. He types everything, and yet he keeps a box of stationery by his keyboard, and he says whenever he wants somebody to feel special, he stops sending an email, He picks up the stationery, scribbles something. He's got terrible handwriting, sticks a stamp on it and drops it in the mail. And he says it works like a magic charm.
Yes.
That people love to get something handwritten. It's just like this secret weapon.
Exactly. So remember out there, your secret weapon, if you're trying to get that special someone or just send a little bit of love to someone out there, remember your secret weapon is your handwriting, even if it's not the best handwriting in the world.
Oh, it almost doesn't matter. I've always maintained that the worst handwriting is still better than the best email.
Ah, yes.
Because the best email is just a typeface.
Exactly.
It's not you.
It's not you. It's not your face at all.
It's not your face, exactly.
Exactly, as we said before. Now, having met with both long-standing calligraphers like Minh Đức or Vĩnh Thọ, and here in Hanoi as well, meeting with some of the lecturers, and then meeting with younger calligraphers, pursuers of digital design and typography. How do you see, what are some of the potentials for the development of Vietnamese calligraphy?
As I said before, I think they're in the forefront of this global Roman alphabet transformation where every country has what you'd call a blended style of their style and Roman letters. I think Vietnam is like 200 years ahead of everybody else with that. And so I enjoy seeing what they do with calligraphy because of that. Beyond that, I also think that Vietnamese people are very enterprising. They are incredibly enterprising.
Good businessmen.
And creative. And so it's been fun to watch what my students do with just a simple assignment. They make pop-up books and see-through pages and all kinds of innovative paper solutions.
Can you share with us some of your future plans? Perhaps a book or something that will involve Vietnam?
So I'd love to write a book about Vietnam and its calligraphy and its culture. I've written these 17 books. That was a familiar way to bring information to people. Now I'm not so sure. It might be a blog. It might be film clips.
Yes.
There are different ways to present materials.
Perhaps your digital design students have inspired you.
Yeah, and they do inspire me, and they remind me that ink on paper is not the only way to communicate.
Yes. What would be your wish for the Vietnamese calligraphers you've met, also the students pursuing calligraphy? What would be your wish for them?
The best thing for them right now would be if a different calligrapher came and gave some workshops. Right now there's a group of maybe 100 people in Vietnam that I've given workshops to. They need somebody different who will come in and say, no, I do it differently. Here's a whole new way of looking at it, because I only have this one perspective. And calligraphy is like this diamond with many, many, many different facets. And you need to have a lot of different teachers.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Margaret.
Oh, you're welcome.
For coming here on this show, for your beautiful demonstrations. And on behalf of the students, thank you for sharing your passion through the workshops. And we hope that you'll come back more in the future.
Well, I hope I'll come back, and I hope somebody else will come with me and give them a different perspective.
Yes.
But I love coming back, so I'm anticipating more trips.
Thank you, and all the best to your future endeavors.
Thanks.
Thank you. And that wraps up our edition of Talk Vietnam this time with Margaret Shedperd. We hope that her demonstrations as well as her talk have inspired you to look again at the inherent tradition of calligraphy in Vietnam, but also maybe to pick up the pen again and look at your handwriting differently. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you more next time here on Talk Vietnam. Goodbye.